I met my first girlfriend in Atlanta in September when we returned to the Electric Ballroom. Amanda was a tall, curvy blonde from Michigan who was traveling with one of our technicians. She flirted with everybody, and finally one night when the technician wasn't feeling well, she slipped him a couple of Valiums and took off with me.
What?
I took her back to New York since we had a few days off. I was still living with my parents. She and I slept on the fold-out sofa in the living room, which was where I slept when I was home. The sofa bed sat against the wall to my parents' bedroom. One morning when Amanda and I were staying there, my mom came out and just making small talk, I asked her, "How'd you sleep last night?" "Not well," she said. "The sofa kept banging against the wall."
Oh, no.
I knew it was time to get a place of my own. To be honest, I had known that for a while, but I hadn't been totally comfortable with the idea of living on my own. Now, conveniently, I had found somebody to move in with.
Somebody told me that we did 4 albums in 2 years or something. You know, when I think back, it doesn't seem like it was that short of a time span, but it was. And we were touring extensively. So I don't know how we pulled it off, to be honest with you. You know, I was kind of loaded half the time, so I just kind of went with the flow. I was like on this roller coaster ride, holding on for dear life. You know, we were getting paid $75 a week or something. You know, we really hadn't made it yet. But prior to Alive, we were still struggling. And, you know, if Alive wouldn't have hit, the band might have folded, you know, financially. Live, we played the songs a lot faster. You know, I think cocaine had something to do with that.
It was a wild time. Later in our careers, we would fly first class on our own jet. But in the beginning, we flew commercial with regular civilians. I remember talking to people about what I did. My hair was big and bushy. We wore platform heels with leather pants and studded belts with spiders encased in the belt buckles, and black fingernail polish. "What do you do?" they would say. "I'm in a band." "What's the name of your band?" "Kiss." "Oh, really? That's a strange name for a band."
One day off in New York, I went to 48th Street to pick up some things at a music store. It was a strange situation because we had gotten quite famous more or less overnight, and yet very few people recognized us without the makeup. I could walk the streets or get a cup of coffee. I could even go to a newsstand and buy music magazines with photos of Kiss in them. Of course, it was different on 48th Street. I didn't look like everybody else. I had the blue-black hair and the street versions of my 7-inch platforms, which I wore all the time. I guess there, among all the music aficionados, people could put 2 and 2 together when they saw a 6'8" guy with mounds of blue-black curls walk in. If that guy isn't in Kiss, the circus must be in town. When I went to check out, carrying a couple sets of strings and a few other things, the shop owner wanted to give it all to me for free. I didn't understand. "It's on us," the guy insisted. The irony was not lost on me. "I can afford it," I said. "I can buy it. Give it to the next guy who comes in and really needs it."
We had become our stage personas, the demon, the star child, and so on. Off stage, we were forced to hide our faces. Photographers were constantly trying to photograph us without makeup. There was a $25,000 price tag on my head. In some ways, we were trapped by what we had created. Initially, it was fun, but in short order, it became difficult. We couldn't go out in public without security. Bodyguards were often asking people to hand over film.
No.
For years, we tried to protect our identity. I mean, that was our gimmick, you know, wearing the makeup. Nobody knew what we looked like without it. I mean, I can't remember how many times Bill Aucoin told me, you know, we paid off a photographer who had photographed us without makeup, you know, to squash it. And you know, a lot of the magazines really, you know, got pictures of us, but wouldn't print them because, you know, they were selling so many copies of magazines with Kiss on the cover with makeup. They didn't want to, you know, ruffle any feathers. I think the first time a magazine printed a picture of us without makeup was Cream.
Differences within the band started to come to the surface. Paul was more the classic rocker. He wanted to be a rock star, period. Ace and Peter had those notions as well, but they were never able to really verbalize just what they were all about.
Though I never saw Gene as like-minded, I did see him as a partner. But to me it was clear that Gene continued to see the band as a vehicle for himself as an individual. Gene was in it for Gene. Whatever the reasons, he didn't share the collective mentality I had. I found security in the band. It provided something lacking in my life. I wanted to belong. I needed that sense of family, of camaraderie, of a support group. So for me, it was always about the team, and I coveted the band above all else.
You know, Paul is like less outgoing. You know, the Paul Stanley you see on stage, he's much more subdued, you know, off stage. I think he's a great songwriter. You know, he knows how to put a song together, you know. He's a great pop songwriter. You know, he's written some great songs over the years, and I respect that, you know. But I should probably produce the next Kiss record. I was kind of the party animal in the 70s, you know, and I gravitated more towards Peter because, you know, after the show, a lot of times me and Peter hooked up and you know, we'll party, you know. I didn't see that much of Paul after the show, you know, so what he was doing on his own, you know, was a big question mark.
I wanted Kiss to be the best of all worlds. I loved comic books. I loved horror movies. I didn't have preconceived notions about rock bands and, quite honestly, didn't care. It wasn't enough to tour and be a recording artist. Somehow, Kiss should be about all these other areas as well.
We certainly weren't born businessmen. Whatever the myth, we were totally green and not savvy at all about tour expenses or bottom lines.
Hi, I'm Gene Simmons, and you're not. No. Bass player in a rock band, which happens to be America's #1 rock band of all time in all categories, is finally going to tell you how you can make some more money and attain power.
Fortunately, as the band began to climb the ladder, Gibson started giving me free guitars. All I had to do was call the company and ask. Then, whenever I was in New York, I would unpack them from their shipping boxes and get on the subway to 48th Street. I took the brand new Marauders they sent me and unloaded them at music stores to put a little extra money in my pocket or to pay the rent.
Bob Ezrin was brought in to produce us. He was Canadian and had been successful with the Alice Cooper albums. Needless to say, we were fans of his work. All the major decisions on the entire record, the sound loops, the children's choir, the kids on God of Thunder, Ezrin's kids, by the way, the string-based Beth, and the song order were completely Ezrin's.
Knew it all, we knew nothing. When we got with Bob, I learned so much more about music and drums and theory, and he helped me write a really big record because it was a great learning experience. I really came out a better musician than when I went in, so it's one of my favorites. Not just because Beth was on it, it was just a great album to do.
He carried a whistle around, and whenever he wanted to get our attention, he would say, "Campers?" Every time we thought we had done enough to satisfy him, he would come at us with something else. In some ways, he was quite a disciplinarian. When he didn't think we were getting a handle on something, he would send us outside the studio.
For a bunch of guys who thought they were hot shit, it was initially jarring to go into a studio with someone who treated us like children. He told us we didn't know anything, which was true. He told us never to stop playing until he said so. Once at the end of a take, long after a fade-out would have ended the recording, Gene stopped playing. Bob came out of the control room and ran up to him, stuck his finger so close to Gene's nose that it made his eyes cross, and said, "Don't you ever, ever stop until I tell you to stop." Ooh. A trickle of sweat ran down Gene's forehead. He never stopped again.
Whoa. You know, Bob was weird. I mean, Bob Ezrin's a brilliant producer. And, you know, I loved all the stuff he did with Alice, and I loved what he did on Destroyer, but, you know, the way he achieved some of the songs and the way he went about it maybe wasn't always the best way. And he was kind of a dictator, you know, but I love Bob. You know, you can't take genius away from somebody that's genius. You know, but how you achieve that, you know, everybody achieves it in a different way. You know, they go about things differently, you know. I prefer working with Eddie Kramer.
As much as Paul and I loved working with Bob, Ace and Peter hated it. For the first time, they couldn't take the easy way out. Ace was not about discipline. He wouldn't even show up on time. And nobody had ever sat Peter down and said, "Here is a 2 and a 4. Huh? He has never been able to articulate his own playing. Peter has always played by feel and couldn't play the same thing twice. As a result, Bob Ezrin's time with the band was very tough for Ace and Peter. or at least that's how they saw it.
I don't really think about the process. I just do it. You know, there's people that watch other people live life, and there's other people that just do it. And I don't really think that much about what I do. I do everything kind of from the gut. If it feels right, do it. Yeah. That's kind of my motto, and it pretty much, you know, hasn't steered me wrong. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Peter, in particular, was devastated by it. He had never had any discipline. He was a street kid. Paul and I had always been critical of Ace and Peter because they didn't get the big picture. In retrospect, I think both of them were feeling quite defeated, although their feelings manifested in different ways. Peter would come out furious that somebody was telling him what to play, or how to sing. That's not rock and roll.
No.
It was the same personality that made him threaten to leave the band if we didn't include his Strange Ways solo.
I worked never so hard in my life to get, and because of the drug addiction of coke, I thought like an idiot trying to keep up with Ezrin, which was an impossibility. By doing more, maybe I'd be better on the drums. The more I did, the worse it got. But I got through it. I did that album. That's me on it.
When it came time for the drums, we faced a real challenge. Bob spent many, many hours teaching Peter his parts. Bob came up with most of the drum parts on the album, and he would dismiss the rest of us for hours at a time to work with Peter. Back then, there were no click tracks, which allow a drummer to work with a sort of metronome to get a consistent tempo. But to get a track the way he wanted it, Bob liked to be able to cut and splice from various takes we recorded, which necessitated a steady pace. That would have been difficult in our case, to say the least. So Bob created a human click track. He sat in the control room with a mic stuck into a hole in a cigar box and tapped the beat on the box and fed it to all of us, most importantly, Peter.
Bob put me through hell, but I was a better drummer from it. It gave me a nervous breakdown, but I deserved that myself because I was killing myself thinking if all this other stuff would work.
Ace would simply leave. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at recording sessions. On one occasion, he wanted to leave early because he had a card game at 7 that evening. At some point, Bob didn't worry about Ace or his excuses. He simply got another guitar player to come in and play Ace's parts. Mainly, he was a guy called Dick Wagner, who played with the Lou Reed Band. He was not credited, and to this day, people think it's Ace on the album.
Many times I didn't think I was cool because maybe I didn't show up, or I was late, or I was too loaded, but, you know, it went along with the territory in those days, you know. I wouldn't do anything any differently than I did.
Ace felt as if Paul and I especially were traitors, and that we told Bob Ezrin to get another guitar player because we never wanted him in the band anyway. Yet we were the ones who brought him into the band, pushed him to write his own songs, and asked him to be more than a guitar player and sing his own songs. He was oblivious to that and continues to be.
But, you know, you gotta realize, you know, when I joined KISS, you know, you had 3 lead singers that were all strong singers, Peter, Paul, and Gene. So, you know, even though I knew I could sing, you know, I had played bar bands and, you know, sung 3 or 4 songs, you know, I still didn't have a lot of faith in my vocal ability. And here you got 3 lead singers belting it out every night, so it took me a while to get up enough nerve to really, you know, try to, you know, compete with them.
During the recording of Destroyer in 1975, I had another drug experience. Not an experience in which I took a drug, but the first time I ever saw cocaine cut up and ready to be snorted. A mirror was built into the control console at the recording studio, and I was clueless about its purpose. I kept on saying, "Look how stupid this is. You have to bend down to see your face." The least they could do is hang it up on the wall, and everybody would laugh. But nobody ever told me what it was for. At the time, I was using Sweet and Low in my coffee because I've always loved desserts but wanted to lose weight. One day I walked in, and there was powder on the mirror. And I was so oblivious to everything about drugs that I assumed it was Sweet and Low. I made myself some coffee, and I brushed some of the stuff on the console into my cup. Then I thought twice about it and said to myself, that's probably got some dirt and stuff. One of the engineers explained it to me. No, that's cocaine. You cut it up. You snort it with a straw. That's stupid, I said. It seemed so stupid to me, in fact, that I actually took Sweet and Low and spread it on the control console. I don't know if anybody took it or not, but I thought that was a funny thing at the time.
We made it out as if we lived like the Help era Beatles and all made music together as equals. But that was never the case. And who should know that better than the people who were actually there and not contributing?